Welcome to the National Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. It's part of the Downtown Catholic Center here in Williamsburg, Virginia. We're on the corner of Richmond Road and Harrison Avenue. And just a little bit of history of how Catholicism came to Williamsburg. But before we even get to that, let's go way back to Nazareth and the site of the Holy House. And one of the reasons this is a National Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham is the connection to the Holy House of Nazareth. So let's talk a little Catholic history first. So you know that in Nazareth, that's the location where Mary said yes to God. And the Incarnation, the House of the Incarnation, happened, the Holy House of Nazareth. So fast forward to 1061, and in England, a British noble by the name of Rekeldus had a vision from the Blessed Mother. And she asked Rekeldus to build a replica of the Holy House to help people in England remember the Holy House of Nazareth, the house where Mary said yes to Christ, to help the people of England continue to say yes to Christ. So that was constructed 1061 in a little town called Walsingham, England. Walsingham, England. So remember that as we get further and further into the story. Now, just another piece of Catholicism that you may or may not know, in the 1500s, the Spanish Jesuits made their way from Florida all the way up the East Coast, and actually even here in Williamsburg, very close to this site where we're at today. And the Jesuits tried to create a colony here, were relatively unsuccessful, although in the 1550s, they actually made some peace with the local Native Americans, and then upon their return in the 1570s, one of the Native Americans that was with them had been trained in the Catholic faith and came back and tried to go back and reintegrate into the tribe, and unfortunately he decided that the lifestyle of the tribe was preferable to that of the Jesuits, and he actually came back and as part of the group actually martyred the 7 Jesuits, including Father Segura. And so here in Williamsburg, that history of the Jesuit martyrdom is also known as the Virginia Martyrs, and so that is tied right here to Williamsburg. So even at Jamestown and up through the 1600s, the Catholic faith was relatively low-key here in Williamsburg. So let's now fast forward into the 1930s and 1920s. And what was happening then? Well, the College of William and Mary had taken off, and there was a young associate professor by the name of Carlos Castaneda. And Professor Castaneda, along with a small group of students, formed the Gibbons Club, named after one of the former bishops of the Richmond Diocese. And Castaneda, the students, and several local residents petitioned the bishop to have Mass here in Williamsburg on a regular basis. And after years and years of petition, finally in 1932, the structure that we now know as the National Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham was constructed. It was called the Gibbons Club Chapel, the College Chapel, but the formal name given to it was St. Bede's Chapel. And that tie to St. Bede in English history was extremely important, given the importance of English history in the area. So let's go inside and take a little look at what was started in 1932. So the land here and the construction was actually financed in part by a bequest from Margaret Burns from Stanton, Virginia. She made a gift to the Richmond Diocese for them to help start new churches in various areas, and Williamsburg was selected. And so we have a plaque here commemorating Mrs. Burns. This building was built here in 1932, and parishioners were involved in the actual design and architecture and construction of the building. 2 gentlemen by the name of Williams and Coyle actually had an architecture and engineering firm in Newport News, and they were parishioners here. And so they helped with the first construction of this main transept here at St. Bede. And one memento of that is Forrest Coyle actually We have a painting here of St. B that hangs in the back of the narthex. So as we move into the main body of the church, this was all built in 1932 originally. And over the years, it's undergone a series of renovations, and the most recent renovation actually involved an extensive remake of the interior here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is the 1932 section. We'll get to, in a little bit, the 1956 section, and there's also some relationship to Williams and Coyle then. But let's talk about the main transept here and what was done. So internally here we have new porcelain flooring, we have new pews, we have new lighting, and we have new interior paint. Now the interior paint is a Marion blue, and it was meant to match the original ceiling that we believe was instilled here by the first pastor. So let's talk about our first pastor, Father Thomas Walsh. So Father Walsh, a young Irishman from New England, came down here to the Richmond Diocese and was installed as the first pastor of St. Bede Church in 1939. Well, a couple years prior to that, Father Walsh happened to be making a pilgrimage in Europe, and one of the places he visited was Walsingham, England. And he was so taken by the devotion and dedication by people to Lady of Walsingham that he decided to make a personal vow that when he became a pastor here in the U.S., he would dedicate a church to Our Lady of Walsingham. And so that is part of the story of how this became dedicated to Our Lady of Walsingham. So let's go through the rest of the nave here and take a look, and we'll start to talk about the actual shrine and what we have here. Some of the things that you'll notice in the nave from the original, the Stations of the Cross now have been moved. They were originally just in this part of the church, in this main transept, and they've been spread around. So we have the first 6 stations in this transept, and the balance, the rest of the 8 stations in the new transept. And we'll talk about that in a minute. A couple other things that you may or may not notice. We actually have an induction loop here. So if you're hearing impaired, we actually have devices here available, or if you have a T-coil, you can flip that in your hearing aid, and you'll be able to hear the sounds of both the priests and the choir perfectly clear. And that's been done. So as we take a look now, we're really zooming in on the heart of what we have here in the National Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. The statue of the shrine here was carved in Walsingham, England by Lillian Douglas. Lillian also carved the statues that are present at the shrine in England, and those were done in about 1941. In addition to the statue, you see we have cherubs on either side, and then we also have statues of the Sacred Heart of Jesus on the left and Joseph on the right. And one of the features that we brought back into the shrine now is to have the tabernacle front and center. Those of you that have been here before may know that the tabernacle used to be located down a short transept here. And so we moved the tabernacle back to the center, and the tabernacle and the altar are both on the same level, which is important in Catholicism, to have the altar of sacrifice and the altar of repose at the same level, so neither one takes precedent over the other, remembering always that Jesus is present in the tabernacle. Which reminds me, some other features you might notice is that the tabernacle area now is 2 steps lower than it was in the original. Part of that is just due to engineering. The top 2 steps that were there before were actually overloaded from a physical load standpoint, so we actually had to level that. The other advantage of that, though, is it's made it level all the way back into the sacristy, so people can move in and out without going up and down steps and trying to navigate that. So the other things you'll notice, the sanctuary lamp is relatively in the same place where it was or a couple other things that you may or may not notice. The statue itself was actually cleaned. We had a local artisan clean the statue, so that's been done. And in the future, we'll look at cleaning up the statues of Joseph and the Sacred Heart of Jesus as well. So we'll move down the short transept now, and we've moved our votive stands over here along with the crucifix, and eventually we'd like to create a mural telling the Walsingham story on this in this part of the church. It will be an area of devotion and one that can help us to explain to people who are not familiar with the Walsingham story exactly how Walsingham and Williamsburg tie together. Looking down the other part of the transept, and these parts were built in 1956 by the sons of Williams and Coyle. Interestingly enough, we see again new pews down this section, and we were able to space the pews out a little bit. So we removed one pew from each section, the back of each section, and spaced the pews out a little bit. And at the end, you'll notice there's two niches, and those will accommodate shortly statues of St. Anne and St. Joachim, who were Mary's parents and the owners, if you will, of the Holy House of Nazareth. So we've made a number of improvements in here. There's a number of other things we'd like to do over time. Potentially look at some decorative painting on the ceiling. Outside, we've got a special niche to remember the Virginia Martyrs that we'd like to incorporate a statue of St. Michael the Archangel at some point. There's a lot of hardscaping we could do out there to make this a much more friendly place for after-Mass gatherings. And, you know, as we begin to clean these statues and bring them, I'll say, back up to some of their original luster and stature, that will begin to happen over time here. So I want to conclude by just thanking all of you that donated to this project. We generated a little over $800,000. The total project was about $950,000. So we've taken on a little bit of debt as the parish of St. Bede. I want to thank John Hopke, who's our videographer here. John is the development director for the Catholic Campus Ministry with the College of William and Mary. And they are really the main, I'll call occupants. They use this area for their prime worship space. And so the partnership between the campus ministry, which started with Carlos Castaneda in 1923, and St. Bede Parish continues to this day in terms of how we work together to promote the Catholic faith here in Williamsburg. So again, thank you to all of you that participated. If you want more information, there's a wonderful book called The Holy House that tells the story of this. It was written by parishioner Michelle Spike, and it's available at St. Bede, and you can pick them up there at our Ironbound campus, and that tells in greater detail the story of Walsingham and how we got to where we're at today. So thanks for your time. Come visit us here once these COVID times are eased a little bit, and we can open the shrine to visitors. So thank you.